Hello, everyone. I'd like to give once again a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us from around the world on this virtual Congress. My name is Francine Sayok with the International Seed Federation, and I will be your moderator today. Today sets the tone for the 3-day virtual event, and we are so thrilled to have with us a great set of speakers whose opening remarks you've heard in the previous session. And now they're here to answer your questions live. For our audiences on Zoom, you will see a Q&A button where you can send your comments or questions for the speakers. I'd like to briefly introduce them once again. Joining us from Spain is the President of ISF, Mr. Eduard Fito.
Hello.
We also have the Secretary General of ISF with us, Mr. Michael Keller. And calling in from Finland very shortly, we have the Chair of the FAO International Steering Committee for the International Year of Plant Health, Mr. Ralf Lopian. And last but definitely not the least, we have the National Organizing Committee for the 2021 World Seed Congress to be held in Barcelona, Spain. We have with us Mr. Julian Arnedo. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Well, I'd like to kick off the conversation and start with what Michael referred to in his speech as the elephant in the room. Edward, in light of COVID-19, what were your recent realizations on the role of seed in food production and food systems? Can you tell us very quickly what was your main takeaway during this experience?
Well, definitely. So we faced problems. The movement of seeds was definitely put at stake at a certain level, but I think that it didn't went too far. And I think, and that was like this because I think the governments and regulators, they realize about the importance of our industry. I think that every single government and regulators, they consider us as an essential industry and help us on that. So I think that it was a fantastic opportunity to give this message to the whole world.
And Julian, how has the experience been for ANOVE during COVID-19? What were your members' experience during the pandemic in terms of seed movement and operations?
The situation is many troubles, but it's not the same in the north and in the south of Spain. Now the situation is not very bad. but the business is okay. The seed business is good.
Michael, would you like to add to that from a global perspective? And as a second question to you, Michael, as well, do you think the current situation will take another look at innovation in seed as a necessity in building a healthy food supply chain?
Yeah, thanks, Francine, for the question. First of all, I think today it's important that we hope that everybody listening and watching us is fine and healthy in a safe place, because we see many countries in the world, the numbers are still increasing. We are not at the end of COVID-19. And I think when I would like to say perhaps something you heard a lot, but it's a reality. The future will be unlikely what we had in past. The future will be different, and we will never come back to a business like usual as in past. I think this is something we have to take yet away from this experience. The second point perhaps, and as Eduard mentioned, I think for us as the seed sector, it was immensely important that we were recognized as an essential good and system relevant in the food supply chain. And I think this for us, the seed sector, is important. And it was important that we were able, all our colleagues, even during these very difficult times with curfews, lockdowns, many people home-based, we were able to deliver the seed for the planting season, mainly Northern Hemisphere, but also Southern Hemisphere, and to continue, as we know, the tropical hemisphere, where it's continuous planting at the end, that we were able to do it. And this is important. And this is clearly somehow a takeaway. And the second takeaway I would like to mention here is, I have the feeling, even if we are facing a pandemic, but as we have facing the pandemic together, all together, I think we will be more united in the future than we were in past. And there's an increasing consensus. You can feel it in the discussions we had with many stakeholders around the world on the importance of sustainable agriculture, the importance of sustainable food production. And I think the major concern is for the moment to secure food. But there is also, what is the future? Healthy foods, quality foods. And we should not forget, yes, we are facing COVID-19, but we have in the future to feed more people. Temperature will go up. We need to preserve biodiversity. We have less arable land. We have increase of pests. We have more needs from consumers coming. All this needs to be addressed. And I think that that's for me the third point perhaps is there is an increase in also acceptance that innovation is essential. For having sustainable agriculture, innovation and science is critical. Breeding, digitalization, big data, many doors are open. We need to be able to use them. And I think this will be the next weeks, months, and years where we have to sit down together and to address how we can build sustainable agriculture together.
Thank you, Michael. We have now with us Mr. Ralf Lopian, the chair of the International Steering Committee for the International Year of Plant Health. And we know that 2020 has been marked by the UN as the International Year of Plant Health. Tell us, Ralf, how has the current situation affected the celebration of IYPH?
The current pandemic has affected the International Year of Plant Health quite substantially, since there have been a number of meetings scheduled. Amongst others, we had for the end of March, beginning of April, we had a ministerial meeting of plant health regulators scheduled in Rome. We had an international plant health conference scheduled in Helsinki for October. Those meetings have been cancelled and have been rescheduled for 2021. On national levels and regional levels, many countries and regional organizations had organized meetings which all have been more or less cancelled. Trade fairs, agricultural fairs, which were supposed to highlight plant health, have been cancelled all around the world. The work in raising the awareness about plant health has suffered considerably. What we have been trying to do is compensating through social media and through virtual means by doing webinars, regional webinars, national webinars, podcasts, and so on. But still, it has suffered considerably. However, we have rescheduled a number of meetings until next year, and the final event of the International Year of Plant Health will happen from the 28th of June to the 1st of July 2021. It will be the International Plant Health Conference in Helsinki, and on the 1st of July we have the official closure of the International Year of Plant Health.
Thanks for that, Ralf. And maybe to add a bit of context on what the celebration of the International Year of Plant Health means for the seed industry, Michael, could you give us a bit of insight on what is the significance of IYPH to seed companies and seed associations?
Yeah, thanks, Francine. And as Ralf mentioned it in his introductory talk, is seed health, plant health, food health are interrelated. And I think we all know plant health is the main source of nutrition. And the seed sector knows about its responsibility to provide healthy seed. That's clear. That's even the impact on farmers would be terrible if they get infected seeds, but also for consumers. That means that's a permanent engagement of the private sector and the seed sector to provide healthy seed. We are also investing a lot in breeding programs, but we have also initiatives like the International Seed Health Initiative, where we engaged on preventing to be seed as a pathway of pests and diseases, because we heard there's a more movement of seed. That means our responsibility is extremely high. And what we are always saying, and this international year, yes, it's 1 year, but it's a permanent engagement and we will not stop here. And the countries want to avoid any spread of pests within their country. But the private sector want to avoid the same thing. The perspective is perhaps different, but the goal is the same. That means, therefore, the engagement is extremely high from the whole sector. I'm speaking about seed sector, but also the other private sectors in the input sectors. Integrated pest management are important, I think, to be mentioned today. Only jointly we can succeed. And our National Seed Association, I would like to mention here, because they've done a tremendous job also in the engagement against COVID-19, but also on seed health, are fully engaged, and we will continue to be engaged, even if this year it's a little bit difficult with this international year, but there are many actions to come in the future.
Now, speaking about cooperation, this question is for you, Ralf. Have you observed a change in the relationship between NPPOs and seed companies? Did you see cooperation during recent months?
That is a relatively difficult question to answer, because I'm sitting in Helsinki, and I'm sitting since about almost 3 months in isolation at my home. The interaction with companies and with the sector is relatively sketchy. And I can only do that from a national point of view, from the Finnish point of view, since I do not know very much how other countries interacted with their seed industry at the time. However, I would like to point out in this context that we have been trying to make the international movement of seed, among them of agricultural or regulated goods, very easy by making an international recommendations that countries should accept phytosanitary certificates, which have been issued in an alternative way than usual because of the COVID-19 situation. There are not so many interactions between producers and traders anymore, and the inspectors, because of the isolation or the social distancing, and therefore we have also tried to take account of that and given within the IPPC a recommendation to accept other means of phytosanitary certificate transmission. In addition to that, and here I think that is something which may be especially valid for the seed trade and for international movement of seed, is we are internationally on the eve of having the international e-phyto, electronic phytosanitary certificate. We are basically one step away from almost all countries in the world applying an electronic phytosanitary certificate, which would make trade much easier and would take especially account of such situations as we have at the moment. So I think the international phytosanitary community and the IPPC has done quite a lot in the future to ease the trade or also of seed, and also to make it much cheaper for traders and producers to get phytosanitary certificate and to transmit them to the country of destinations. I hope I have answered the question.
Thank you, Ralf. We're receiving a lot of good questions on our Q&A, and I'd like to throw 2 of them to Edward and to Julian. There are questions about the disruption in labor, because as a result of the pandemic, how does the situation impact row crops and horticultural crops from the Spanish perspective, because these are perishable and labor oriented? And there's also a question from Mr. Mike Gumina, that it seems that although we got through the last few months based on work accomplished before the crisis, what next? Especially as labor is affected and it requires hundreds of thousands of people to manage pollination, harvest, and seed conditioning. What are your thoughts on managing this hurdle?
Well, in Spain, at least, from the very beginning, so the food industry was considered essential. So all the labor was allowed to go to their sites, let's say, to go to their jobs, and so there was not a big deal to cover all these needs. in the past. Now maybe for more the seasonal crops like fruits and so on. So we are facing some problems because people cannot move from one province to the other, for instance, and that's causing some troubles. And although the unemployment rates, it's high here in Spain, so not everybody is willing to do this kind of job. So usually people are moving from one province to the other, or even immigrants that coming from abroad. And yeah, definitely we are facing problems. But it's important that we acknowledge this, that so we have to make sure that this especially for the vegetables, but again for the row crops as well. So we always find good labor to harvest and to keep our crops and then eventually harvest. But I think, as I said before, from the very beginning, the governments have pay a lot of attention to that, and at least here in Spain, we did it pretty well.
Mr. Julian, would you like to add something to this?
Yes, there are some problems now with it's not easy to find workers. Now is the season for cherries, for example, and there are not workers. There are people that work in other business like administration, but it's not easy to work in the fields harvesting cherries, for example. We will hope problems this summer to harvest, for example, peppers in open field. And this is now we are accelerating the breeding program for harvesting mechanical harvest for many crops like peppers, because in the future we will not easy to find workers.
Thanks for that. Now I'd like to take a moment and talk about innovation in science, because I know this is a very important topic for our sector. And Michael, this question is for you. How do we communicate with politicians who still take decisions that are sometimes devoid of science and is hurting innovation, making it more difficult for the seed sector to contribute to the achievement of the SDGs? How do you think we can turn this around?
I think the most important thing is, and that's for me this takeaway also from this crisis, somehow we are all sitting in the same boat, and there needs to be an understanding also from the political side on what is our role, what are we doing, and what is our support somehow. I mentioned a lot the challenges ahead of us. We had a lot of challenges yet back. Look how many people we can feed today, because look, 30 years ago, how many less people we had, and how many people we have today, we are able to feed them. The requests are changing. And I think that's where I'm saying is, and I mentioned this in my talk, it's a lot about trust. Yes, the seed sector has also to build more trust perhaps in what we are doing. We have to explain how we function. Perhaps the next 2 days also about seed sector innovation. We can explain further what are our goals, what are our objectives, because we are not doing innovation for innovation. We are doing innovation because farmers are facing issues in the fields. We are doing innovation that we can secure food security. And everybody heard about it. World Food Program mentioned there will be hundreds of millions, perhaps more people having hunger. That means, therefore, there are problems, there are challenges, and our capacity to address these challenges depends also from our capacity to use, and we heard about it, latest breeding methods. But it's also, and I think that's immensely important, that the farmers around the world, all sizes of farmers, have access to improved varieties. And I think that's where we need to explain, that's where we need to engage, that's where we need also to build more trust from the government official side, but also international bodies on the role. Seed is the starting point of agricultural production. And therefore we know our responsibility, but I think we know also what we can provide further. And I think here the pandemic should learn us. There was a high threat, and there is still a high threat on food production. There are lots of questions on food security and food safety. Only together we can do it. we are ready, and we are in a very open and transparent engagement with all stakeholders and policy meeting, like here, this virtual Congress.
Thanks for that, Michael. And I'm receiving questions on the spread of diseases and pests. So maybe this is a nice question for you, Mr. Lopian. Diseases and pests are traveling at alarming speed globally, so that awareness and controlling mechanisms have to be further strengthened under IPPC and other organizations. How would you like to comment on this statement?
I would like to say that this statement is spot on. We have observed that pests and diseases are spreading, I would say, at a speed which we haven't really seen before. And I tried to point that out in my opening remarks, that the tripling of the world trade in agricultural products since the beginning of the millennium in 20 years is only one part of it. What we have seen is that commodities are being traded from origins where usually we didn't have this commodity before. That opens up a completely new host pest combinations. This year, this International Year of Plant Health is, let's say, a cry for help, that we make it known to political decision makers around the world that plant health is really under threat, and that we have to do something to counter it. I must say, this year is basically to educate decision makers, but also the public, that we have something to protect. We have a biodiversity heritage to protect, and seed is an important part of that, because most important pests which have been introduced very aggressively and spread very aggressively have been introduced via propagation material, not necessarily seed, but material which was used for further propagating, and so the seed sector has been relatively, let's say, in the past years, has been relatively positive in its development. And in the IPPC, we have worked together very, very intensively with the seed sector, also the International Seed Federation. We have developed standards for seeds, but there's a need to make decision makers aware that there's more to be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralf. And now, from talking about the challenges, I'd like to shift now to something positive, something to look forward to. And next year, we know, of course, that Barcelona will be the host of the next ISF World Seed Congress. Mr. Arnedo, can you tell us a bit about what we can look forward to?
I hope that the next Congress will be a normal Congress. The situation, I hope that will change, but all things are running. The venue, the hotels, the organization is okay. Barcelona is a wonderful city. In the May is a very good time to enjoy the city. I think that the Congress in Barcelona will be a very good Congress.
Thanks. Michael, is there anything you'd like to add to this, the significance of next year's Congress?
Yeah, first of all, I think we are still all sad that we cannot shake hands with so many friends around the world. Normally we should be together in South Africa. Therefore, you cannot imagine how we are yet excited. And we're in the middle of the preparation of next year. And I think one thing we see yet, I see all the questions here coming. There's so many questions coming. We see also that next year, yes, it will be in person. I'm convinced it will be in person. But at the same time, we need to bridge also our Congress with the virtual world. It needs to be both. That means when we meet in person there, we need to connect also with those who are not attending the Congress. And I think that's something we will certainly work out during the next weeks and months to bridge us better and more together in future. And I'm pretty much sure next year, lots of people will come because so many people missed this year.
That's very true. And Edward, you are, of course, wrapping up your 2-year presidency at ISF, and it's a pity that we're not together to cap off this this great term of yours. But just to wrap up this 2-year presidency, what are the outstanding insights you've gained during your term that you'd like to share with everyone?
That's a good question. So, well, first of all, that I enjoy it very much. I learn a lot. It's good to see the seed industry from inside. So I can tell you that me attending these congresses for many years, so I was here roughly to trade and to do business, but also there are a lot of things going on in the seed industry that needs to be understood. There is a very complex industry that needs to have a lot of engagements, a lot of contacts with nearby players. I mean, growers or farmers or the biotechnology as well. So you can go upstream, downstream, whatever you want. And also, so here, so this from a personal perspective, that was great. And I also wanted to share that, and because it's from outside, maybe people don't realize how complex and how diverse this industry is. And then talking about the ISF itself, so I think that the tremendous work that we did to facilitate the movement of seeds with the system approach, I think that was one of the most, although we are not yet there, but I think that we are doing a good job here. And also, although again, so it's not yet finalized, but the international treaty to address all these genetic resources, I think that is also an impressive amount of job that has been done, and still, but I think that it's important. And last but not least, I would say that also we are acknowledging that our business model that we have created all together from the production, the breeding, and then the trading, so can be at stake due to some practices that are not really acceptable, and we need to fight those practices. And I think that all together we are creating awareness and also put in place mechanisms to mitigate those effects. And I think that also we've been talking a lot and discussing a lot about these illegal seed practices. So I would say probably those 3 things maybe would be the things that I would like to highlight.
Thanks a lot for that, Edward. We are down to the last few minutes of our live Q&A, and I'd like to give the last question to Michael. Would you like to give us some concluding remarks or some reflections about all the statements we've heard today, and perhaps give us a little preview of what people can expect in the coming days and beyond?
Oh, that's a difficult one, Francine. We could discuss further hours about the topics we just started. Therefore, please stay tuned. Tomorrow, 12 p.m. CST. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. CST. We will speak about seed industry, how we face the situation COVID-19, what are future opportunities, I'm insisting. And on Wednesday, 12 p.m. CST, really high-level discussion about the role of innovation on science, also in seed breeding. And I think it's not here a wrap-up, but to take into account what we heard also. Yes, there are a lot of questions on seed supply. And yes, we need to ensure seed supply. But I would like to emphasize here, and somehow it's confirming from where we are coming. What is the vision of ISF? Make quality seed accessible to all around the world. For doing what? To support sustainable agriculture and food security. More than ever, this is important. More than ever, we need to be able to breed, to produce. And we have questions about the production. Will the production be fine next year? Because the field workers couldn't perhaps not go to the field, to water, or to travel there. We will have trade in the future. These are the questions which are not only relevant for us, because one thing is clear, seed supply is international. No country is independent on seed supply. And therefore, more than ever, and I think perhaps the pandemic will help us also, we are discussing about food systems. Yes, that's good, food systems. That's the major topic, but all starts also with the seeds. And if we, as the private sector, can also contribute to the food system, to provide improved varieties, to address the different challenges, we are looking also in an internationalized world for consistency. We need consistency. Ralf, you mentioned it also, on the treatment, on regulations, on pests and diseases. We need the consistencies in regulation. We hope that the implementation of the international standard of phytosanitary measures will come soon, because it's important, field is moving. We want to fulfill the requirement, science and risk-based requirement. That's essential, that's our role. The same for innovation. We agreed innovation is essential. It's not innovation for innovation, it's innovation to address issues. But to address issues, we need also to be able to use all the different tools. Since ever, the tools, the methods are evolving. And we need to be able in an internationalized, globalized world, also in a consistent way to be able, different breeding tools. It's absolutely essential to be able together to address the challenges, sustainable development agenda, sustainable development goals. It's in 10 years. Lots of things start with seeds. Consistency is important. The private sector, I think, is ready. And I hope during the next 3 days, we will show that we are ready. Alone, we cannot do it. And we are not pretending to do it alone. We want to do it together. Also, public sector, NGOs, but also regulators and the international organizations. That means I'm pretty much sure COVID-19 will change, and I think will change also the mindset that we will be able together. And I would like to take the words of Berchtold, hand in hand, like FAO is saying, hand in hand, everybody together, and to build, because this one we didn't touch a lot. I mentioned it in my introduction. In many countries in the world, we need still to work also to build vibrant seed sectors. Many things to do, but I think ISF, we are optimistic. We will support our members, and I think in the name of all the 7,500 seed companies, we are ready to support also to be able to address food security and food quality for the future. Thank you, Francine.
Thank you, Michael. Well, it has been a very interesting and informative discussion we've had today. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. And once again, I would like to thank the speakers for giving us your time and your expertise. And to those of you who joined us today, I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. And we hope to see you again tomorrow, same time, for a very exciting topic, the future of the seed industry. So thanks, everyone, and see you tomorrow.